time to market, time to market, time to market. That is really what it's all about in the data center business. We need more data center capacity, and we need it right now. But we also need it on home soil, and we need it to be sustainable. So how do you balance all of those requirements at once? Well, it turns out that in Sweden, we have one of the frontrunners in the data center field. They are called EcoDataCenter. They are working with some of the biggest players in AI business to create solutions that are not only the cutting-edge innovation, but also at the cutting edge of sustainability. I am your host, Oliver Oberg, and in today's episode of The Great Switch, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Peter Michelson, CEO of EcoDataCenter, along with our very own Anna Andersson, the CEO of Schneider Electric Sweden. We had a great conversation about how you balance capacity, speed, innovation, and sustainability, and how we make things right now. Enjoy. Peter, I would love to start with you. First off, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very nice. And we also have Anna Andersson with us.
Yes.
For Schneider Electric. We will deep dive a bit into both of you guys today, where you come from, what insights you have, and hopefully we can dwell a bit on that. But first, I would love to start with you, Peter, on hearing about what kind of big impact you feel that you have done throughout your career, if you may, like within the energy transition, and what switches you have turned within that.
Yeah, I guess one big switch has actually been recently for me. So I come from a long background in Ericsson and then joining EcoDataCenter about 2.5 years ago. And for me then going from that big company, amazing journey, but being able to bring a wealth of experience and toolbox and then applying that into a scale up of the kind of EcoDataCenter, and now seeing the amazing journey that we are on and becoming kind of a globally recognized platform. So I think that's kind of one big takeaway for me.
So, Ericsson, you took the shift from Ericsson, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2.5, yeah.
And you spent almost 24 years.
Only 24 years.
Only 24 years. Yeah, that's a minor. Yeah, no, but that is like, what made you decide to stop at Ericsson and start the job as CEO of EcoDataCenter?
Now, there were a couple of factors in play. I mean, one was that within Ericsson, I'd had many kind of entrepreneurial roles, scaling new businesses, breaking new ground and so on. So that kind of innovation entrepreneurs that I had a chance to kind of bring inside Ericsson. That said, then you're almost like you're the second fiddle in that big of a company, right? And having that ultimate accountability was something I aspired for, but also then given the growth opportunities with cloud and AI, seeing that opportunity and being part of that journey. I mean, it's once in a lifetime career opportunity. So I was super thrilled to kind of jump on board and never regretted it ever since.
What kind of, like, what would you say is the difference from EcoDataCenter that we see today compared to the data center that you went into?
Yeah, I think while there was a very kind of promising, start of the company, a strong entrepreneurial spirit, built a superior product, starting to get some really good traction, etc., with strong customers. It's also been now as we scale up the company, right? How do you bring that experience in what it actually needs then in terms of getting into big customer engagements or scaling out operations and so on? So I think again then that toolbox of experience from large companies and so on makes a huge difference, and I take some pride in applying some of that into the mix.
Mm. And Peter, I mean, you spent some 24 years with Ericsson, and that was one example of, lessons learned from Ericsson into EcoDataCenter. Could you elaborate a little bit more? What have you learned, lessons learned from Ericsson that you feel today, this is really useful for my current role with developing your company?
No, great question. And I think a few things. I mean, one is I take bringing energy to the table and optimism. It's, you need a highly engaged team, and getting there, you need to really kind of boost that yourself. So living by that notion of always kind of give more than you take, I think is super important. That's one. I think the second then, I had the opportunity to work with big clients like Google, Facebook, AT&T, Comcast, etc. And it takes a certain experience knowing knowing how to navigate those big stakeholder organizations and so on. I think that's also been helpful to bring to that table. And then lastly, I mean, it is different when you scale a company in terms of getting processes in place, structure, follow-up, governance. It may sound boring, but unless you have some of that also under the hood, it's actually difficult to kind of drive that scale up in an organized fashion. So I think those are some of those examples of experiences.
I agree, and I spent some 18 years only with Ericsson.
Only 18?
Only 18 years, and I think also what I see with you, when you talk about your customer, you know, customer first, you know, what brought us here, what keep us here, and you have a really passion for building, you know, the business with your customer, and that goes, you know, as first for you.
Yeah, no, but that has probably been the common denominator of what I've done, right? Being in very kind of, front edge type of roles and having the opportunity also to break a lot of new ground. So I was selling connected cars back in 2012, smart connected waste bins 2013 and so on, probably 10 years too early with Internet of Things and everything, right? But being at that forefront of both development and kind of evolution of a business, but then doing that also with leading customers who really kind of want to invest and be those leaders. And I think if I look at EcoDataCenter today and our customer portfolio, I think we have some of those really tier one players who are breaking the new ground in the shape of kind of AI, etc.
Yeah, and it's an impressive, you know, customer list that you do have. And a little bit curious then, just staying at the topic with customers, you know, how are they shaping you now in your current role? Because they are quite demanding, right?
Yeah, no, but big time. But I'm also a firm believer that if you build that intimacy and those partnerships, that actually helps you to be a better kind of supplier or partner to them as well, right? So by being very close to them, we understand what are those requirements, what are they looking at in their 3 to 5 year horizon. And that then, if we bring that back, helps us making sure that our R&D and our product development is on par with it, etc. So that voice of the customer is something I take to heart every day, and why I probably spend, I would estimate 25-30% of my time is with customers.
Speaking of customers, I know that you have some business going on with DeepL, right? And the data center business is like how it's changing right now, and the demands that you have on your market is quite extreme, I would say. I read about your corporation and like DeepL, who is one of the front runners within language AI, and therefore also like you need to rapidly meet the increasing demands that they have within your data center. So I would imagine that balancing some pretty heavy capacity needs with sustainability considerations, like how do you balance that?
Yeah, but it's a great question and something we take a lot of pride in, right? That being a technology leader, you can actually combine that with also being sustainable. And that I think we've proven not only with DeepL, but also with other customers in that sense, right? So if you take a few of the ingredients of what we do there with DeepL, right? So they were the first in Europe to launch NVIDIA's next generation AI chips. So that's kind of Europe's first integrated AI factory. And what's in play then, if you look at kind of how we do that in a sustainable fashion, is then it's 100% renewable energy. So we use a lot of water and wind in that. So it means close to zero emission, both kind of market and location based. Then we were also first in the world, and still alone to my knowledge, of using kind of HVO or biofuel for the backup generators, where everybody else uses diesel. So there we also kind of breaking new ground. And then we also then work with using the excess heat, currently for a use case around drying wood for pellet kind of factory or production. But we've also then prepared that for kind of district heating, etc. So those are the type of things that we try to do then to make sure that, yes, it's kind of the most front edge AI solution out there, but it can also be done in a sustainable way. And that was hugely important for DeepL in making that selection with us in the first place as well.
And I just need to build a little bit of that, what you're saying with, green energy, sustainable, we have the climate, etc. How do you think we can position Sweden even more in that area, not only with EcoDataCenter? Because, we talked about that before, Peter, that if you take AI, it's, it drives a lot of power consumption, but it's so much needed in order to, find innovation that is going to reduce the power consumption. And when we have all, important foundations of sustainability here in Sweden, how can we become better in promoting that?
Yeah, no, great question. And for me, I think what it takes is actually that you bring all the required stakeholders to the table and you take more of a system view around energy, right? So it can start everything from like, how do we add to the pie, power purchasing agreement and other mechanics for that, right? Into what you actually do in your own data centers. And in our example, then to mention a few things we do, we were the first to build in wood. Everybody thought we were crazy. Now Microsoft, Meta, Google have followed suit. We are using 100% renewable energy. That's not the case for everybody, but a lot of players in Nordics have that advantage, which is obviously hugely important. And then using that excess heat. And I think that's the real kind of holy grail, where that's going to be difficult to do all alone, because now when you're moving from what's called air cooling to liquid cooling, you're actually getting up to higher temperatures, and that allows for much more interesting use cases. But then, for instance, if you want to connect to district heating, well, then you need to work with the local municipality to make that happen. You need to look at the total investments required for piping and so on. But if you bring those stakeholders together, then you can solve that. And as a matter of fact, right now in Falun and Borlänge, we're in that very discussion with the municipalities to connect to that district heating system. But so I really think it's not something you can solve your own. You actually have to bring everybody involved in that value chain to see how do we do this together.
And you have done that, and you have been working on that very successfully. But I guess, in the beginning, how was it then? Were everybody happy and, wow, EcoDataCenter is coming to Falun? Because if you look a little bit to know, if you, in the layman, what is data center? Is it bringing anything value, work and so on, new, jobs at the site and so on? So can you, tell us a little bit, how was it in the beginning?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think, both if I look at the beginning, but also if you just read media today, I think there's obviously that concern of, hey, what is AI used for? Is it really valuable? It consumes a lot of energy, etc. Right? But first off, if I start with the history, then coming into Falun, etc. This was obviously kind of a breakthrough innovation of the founding team back in the days. But even then, everybody was looking at, so really, what is a data center? And there were some kind of bad connotations, perhaps, to the Facebook establishment up in Luleå and so on. But quite quickly then, I think the local municipality, the politicians on really understand that this was a different one. And now we've been working hip to hip in all that development, and fantastic support all the way through. And the same thing that was then connecting to the local energy provider there, Falun Energy. Which has then kind of been helpful in, for instance, then, our idea of using that excess heat, which is something they jumped on and something we developed. So I think they've been really kind of good pioneers in that sense, and we're super proud of that journey. And now as we're kind of shifting and moving over to Borlänge, that has been also super important for us, because the same skepticism reached us initially in Borlänge, where there was also then a former Northvolt attempt at an establishment which didn't succeed. So obviously us coming in there, it was a little bit of that discussion, like, wait a minute, is this going to be yet another of those green transition projects that won't succeed and so on? But with a lot of kind of outreach, a lot of dialogue with the local community and so on, now I feel we have fantastic support also there. So I think it's all about engagement, communication, being transparent about your plans, and then you win trust over time.
And I just have to add on that one. This summer I had the privilege to go listen to a seminar in Almedalen where you, EcoDataCenter, presented this, with the local society and politicians, how you have, been working with Falun. And I think it was, for all of us listening there, great lessons learned, how collaboration is, bringing business and joy to the community.
No, thanks for that. No, and we're super proud of it, but it's also kind of a business criticality for us, because we won't be able to expand unless we also have that support, right? So it really goes hand in hand.
Like, when we speak about these things and the sustainability part of this, and you said you were the first building with wood, right? And would you say that you are a front runner when it comes to these things, or like, are people catching up to you, or do you still have, like, at least when it comes to the sustainability part, using renewable energy and everything like that, would you say that you are front runners, or how much of a tie is it between you and your competitors?
I would definitely say we're a front runner. So I mean, and we look at kind of that scoring all the time. For instance, and we've now been ranked top 1% in the world 2 years in a row. We also have some of the biggest tech players in the world. When they rank us as a provider, we come at the very, very, very top of their ranking and so on. So we take a lot of pride in that we are a front runner. That said, competition will not stand still. This is I wake up every day trying to push myself and the team to see what do we do more now, because obviously whatever we did yesterday, competition are doing today, and that means we need to raise the bar and see what's that next kind of frontier that we need to conquer. And that's why, for instance, I'm so passionate about kind of this exit seat, because there I think the industry to date has failed and there's much that can be done. So I hope that we're going to be the front runners, really taking that to the next level as well.
Super.
Yeah, it's exciting.
This is, I think that is very interesting, and because when looking at this, why doesn't everyone that needs a data center provider, why doesn't everyone choose you? Like,
that's why I ask my customers too. Yeah, no, but I have to say that it's gone perhaps from nice to have to becoming more of a must have, and I see a change in the customer dialogue. But given also the frenzy in the AI market right now, it will be about availability that comes first as a prerequisite. So this will be further down on the list, whether it's number 3 or number 4 as a key buying criteria, etc. But it's increasing in importance, and I think that's just a starting point, because as we now pivot into even more of AI, so if you look about this being traditional enterprise data first, then becoming cloud, and then on top of that now the big growth in AI, with that energy consumption, all of a sudden then you just have to address this if this is going to be sustainable. And if you look at, for instance, all the big hyperscalers, all 3 of them came out last year saying we're missing our emission targets, we need to do more and so on. So us being a partner to customers like that, or others for that matter, then we can help also solve for their equation in kind of where they're currently falling short. But where we're heading with AI, this is a must for the industry if this is going to be sustainable long term.
Talking about AI, let's travel back from Silicon Valley and AI to all the way to Scandinavia and Dalarna, Sweden, right? Because you are busy constructing one of the biggest AI clusters in Europe, in Borlänge. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and here you're refurbishing an old paper mill. Like, tell us a little more about that. What makes you like reuse an old paper mill into AI center? What is that project about?
Yeah, no, and it's a couple of factors in play. And as history is, it's also good to know that we were actually bidding for it the first time around when Northvolt acquired it, but we were already there then, but we lost that bidding. So it's always kind of been something that we've been lurking around, and then the opportunity presented itself. For us, there's a lot of logic involved. One is obviously that being in Falun, which is like a 15-20 minute drive from the Borlänge site, you get synergies with our own staff, but also our customers that actually have people on site for their staff. But perhaps most importantly, given that we try to be sustainable, we have 90% of our subcontractors come from the local community, driving distance to work every day. So like last week in Falun, we had 340 people working on the site from 74 different companies, and they all come from that local geography, right? So that's also how we help that local society. So that was one rationale. But then to your question on the paper mill, that's the beauty, right? Because this has then been a site with tons of power connected into it, 400 megawatts in the past. So as opposed to having to wait for long build times and waiting for concessions,
already hardwired.
Exactly. So in a world where time to market decides everything, I mean, that is kind of a golden site. It's one of the most attractive sites in all of Europe, and when I talk to customers about it, they're like thrilled and want to come in and expand there, etc. So right now, it basically gives us the fastest time to market. We're already kind of shovel in the ground, all permits in place, and first data centers to be up early 27.
So is the permit thing something that usually is an issue for you guys? Because it is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So and you have a couple of aspects in that, right? One is the environmental permit, and that's normally like a 12-month journey. What we managed to achieve in Borlänge is, to our knowledge, the fastest permitting process in Sweden ever. But I also think that came with, again, our track record from Falun, and that we can prove, why this is good for the local community and so on. But then perhaps the long pole in the tent is really the energy situation, right? So the whole rationale for acquiring that site was that we actually also then acquired a connection agreement, which meant that we didn't have to, be standing in line and waiting for years to make that happen. So that is really the quickest time to market advantage. So, but yeah, permitting is super important. And then obviously you have building permits and everything else on top of that. But yeah,
that is really impressive. And Schneider Electric just released a report looking into permits, and see that, the work that is being done in European Union in order to shorten the lead time, because you have mentioned a couple of times, Peter, time to market. And this report unfortunately shows that the permit, average is, from a 10 years perspective, increasing by 50 up to 300%. So, I mean, it's amazing to hear about the Borlänge and the environmental permit there. But what do you think we can, as a Sweden, learn much more from that, what you have done? If you have a, wish list, what do we need to focus on? Because this is a very important question to attract company to come and invest in Sweden.
Yeah, no, spot on, right? And while we are proud of what we did do, I wouldn't say that everything is perfect, right? So I think the biggest challenge we need to solve as a nation is really the energy build out, because that will be the bottleneck. And even now when we look at expansion and looking at scenarios beyond Borlänge as well, the lead times are just too long, right? So Sweden will miss out on this opportunity. So while there has been, I think, a good awakening now that the Europe and Sweden cannot just rely on American tech, etc., we need to build our own digital sovereignty. For that to happen and for Sweden to be part of the solution, we need to speed up. And that I don't see is happening to the extent we need just now. So this is something we're pushing and driving, but in my opinion, it goes a little bit too slow.
I can only agree with that. And also from Schneider perspective, that is also something that we are pushing, because a little bit we have a unique position to make, us really, take the lead, especially here in Sweden with all, the green energy that we have. We have the climate, we have well-educated resources, people, engineers and so on. And then it's like, come on, make it happen, ease up, because how can we do it more effective?
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on, right? And I think other countries would dream about what we have in our book, right? So we have availability of land. I mean, it's cold climate, great for data centers, the skilled workforce that you talked about, great collaboration, municipalities and local enterprises and so on. But the one big, gap we have right now is that energy, right? So for Sweden to capture this opportunity, and if you look at what Sweden has done in the past around tech revolutions, I mean, you had the home PC reform back in the days that led to the Swedish kind of tech wonder with a lot of strong entrepreneurial kind of backgrounds there. You have what we've done in telecom, looking at Kista in the early 2000s, all right. So you do always get those cluster effects, but that then will require us to mobilize around this and get it sorted, because you can see other countries being much more forward-leaning in addressing this. Look at what Macron is doing in France, for instance, right? Really standing on the barricades, driving AI investments into France. We don't necessarily see the same happening here in Sweden.
So about change, I'm thinking that one of the areas who is maybe helping or hindering you with this kind of change is the political area, politicians and such. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, definitely that's part of the equation, right? So if you look at it, this is probably one of the biggest transformative changes we've ever gone through, right? You can look at electrification, industrialization initially and so on, and now you have AI. And it will require a system-wide kind of approach in working together. And why I think business life right now is driving this and so on, I don't necessarily see the same strong political leadership being on those barricades and pushing for it to happen. And I think to be successful here, you need to work with all stakeholders in public sector, in business life, academia and so on, making sure it goes hand in hand. Here I think some other countries have been much more vocal in expressing support and providing direction and investments and so on, where I would actually welcome Sweden to be a little bit more precise in that direction. There was great work done by the AI Commission setting out kind of a direction what we need to do. That has still not been acted upon, right? So I would really welcome that, and I think that will also help drive much stronger public-private partnerships, which I think you're going to need in a change of this magnitude.
agree, and I think also it will drive innovation, and really we have talked about that a little bit before, Peter, but put Sweden again on the map, because we have so many things going for us here in terms of the green energy, the climate. We have a skilled workforce that will support innovation. So I think that if all of us, and especially we talked about permit, for example, if we can ease that to make Sweden become really attractive to continue to invest in. Imagine what kind of business that we evolve here.
No, exactly. And we have all the kind of the raw ingredients of it. Now it's about us coming together to cook that dish, right? And one is addressing that regulatory framework around permitting. You could also look at data centers today, where you may look upon it as the evil consuming a lot of energy, but then going back to that, it's actually something we use in everyday life. How do we rather than cater providing the energy needed, us being a part of that solution in that sense? But you even have a situation today, if you look on kind of taxation, right, where Sweden is by far looking at this as to be the highest tax compared to, say, Finland and Norway, right? Because it's not classified as what's called a base industry, a core industry like manufacturing or something else. But this digital society, you know, the AI data centers are the railroads of the modern world, right? So I think there's lots to be done there that can further help Sweden stay at that forefront of innovation.
For sure, and also you touch upon it, but I mean, it was like, was it 1 year ago when you have the AI report that came out with very much, to the point recommendation, what we in Sweden need to do. So it's just to start implementing them, right?
Exactly, from words to action. That's what I tell my daughters, and I think we can apply that on a larger scale here.
Agree.
While talking about politics, I mean, for Sweden, if we aggregate it a bit and look at the European level, do we have the support you feel from those politicians and from that kind of governments of this, or is it like mainly a focus within Sweden and our boundaries?
No, a great question, and I think there are promising signs of the European Union waking up. I had the fortune to be part of the AI Action Summit in February in Paris, which Macron hosted, and you had all the world leaders there, etc. There, it was evident that there was kind of a clear burning platform, a call to action, and then I was concerned at the time, will this actually now translate into real action? And I think we see promising signs of that. So one is, for instance, around these European Union AI gigafactories, which we as EcoDataCenter are part of and have applied for one, etc. And in that dialogue with Brussels and so on, I do sense a sense of urgency and a decisiveness that I haven't seen in the past. So I think early promising signs, probably still a little bit too early to say yes, it's a victory, but it's definitely a change from the past. And I think European Union has come to the point of saying less focus on regulation and more focus on innovation. And this is where kind of you really need to be if you want to be at the center of AI.
Going back to Falun and Borlänge, a little bit of curiosity here, Peter. What made you choose Falun in the first place?
Yeah, so part of it, and this is also before I joined, right? So the company was founded back in 2014, and then those founders came from Falun, so there was a local connection there. One of the founders even working at the Falun Energy Company and so on, right? But that said, then there is a strategic rationale there, but also one that we continue to apply in the sense of when you look at a site for us, it means a couple of things, right? One is obviously the availability of power and land, so that's one. Second is then connectivity, because again, they need to be transporting those data bits from point A to point B. Third is at least a medium-sized city where you can find that local talent, because if we want to be a sustainable company, we can't have those kind of fly-in, fly-out mechanisms that others are working with. And that actually rules out quite a bit of powered land. I'm getting approach several times a week from developers who have powered land, but a lot of it is noise because it's in places where you can't really establish a business like this, right? So overlaying kind of all of those things together, that is what led kind of to a follow decision, and we continue to apply the same criteria why Borlänge qualified and some other campuses that we're evaluating as well.
About the site in Borlänge and for that matter all of your sites, like when it comes to heat, and now you're also talking about it going more towards water cooling, and that makes me thinking, right? So how much of that excess heat is actually being used Because when you have water cooling, it should be even more easier to transfer that into, I don't know, schools, hospitals, whatever is in the near proximity. You talked about pellets and wood pellets to dry that. Like how much are you working with that?
Yeah, no, great question. And the honest answer is today it's still from small amounts, right? So it needs to start somewhere and, trying out the use cases, make it happen, etc. But with residential heating, and that's why a little bit, I think that's somewhat of the holy grail of this. That's where you actually start using quite a bit of this, and that's what makes it interesting, right? So starting off then with air cooling, you're normally reaching temperatures of say 24, 27 degrees, etc., which is not sufficient to open up to tons of use cases. It does work for the pellets kind of factory or drying the raw material for that pellet, but it's not enough for district heating. With liquid cooling, you're getting up to kind of 55, perhaps even 60 degrees. So that means the delta you have to reach what's applicable then for instance, then district heating is very little, and all of a sudden that business case looks much more promising, right? But in terms then of usage, I mean, when we look at kind of what is all of Falun using energy-wise, for instance, that's roughly 80 megawatts, which is the same as we have in our campus in Falun. In Borlänge, we initially have 246 megawatts. That's going to be able to scale up to 600 over time. That's actually much more than a community needs. So the discussion we're having right now, rather with Falun and Borlänge, is how dependent do they want to be on this? Because perhaps you don't want to use kind of 100% of the heating in a municipality from a data center, but perhaps, a quarter or 30% or something. So this is something we model together right now to see, but it means at least volume-wise we're going to get to very, very different levels compared to where the industry has been in the past. Then you can start looking at the other use cases. We have looked at a very kind of interesting case around food production, so greenhouses basically, and Sweden needs to become much more resilient in own food production given kind of where the world is heading as well. So I think those would also be the type of cases that you can apply forward. So I think, as I mentioned before, where the industry can do much more, this is the area, and I think we're going to see much innovation happening in this space now with temperatures getting higher.
Talking about innovation, EcoDataCenter is definitely a first mover within data center innovation, right? And the industry is changing fast, not only when it comes to technology, but how we think about energy, design, responsibility. Are there even more parts in this kind of innovation where you feel like you are making a change, doing a switch, and really being a front runner?
No, but definitely, and I would say technology and design, right? Hugely important, and today we are recognized as a technology leader in data centers. It wasn't a coincidence that NVIDIA decided to go with us as the first player in Europe and among the very first in the world for the next generation AI chips. The spec to be able to live up to was really, really tough, but it was something that the company designed around already 5 years ago. And now even when we look at the roadmap from NVIDIA, for instance, we know that we're going to be able to carry what they're going to come with 2, 3, 4, perhaps 5 generations out already for how well prepared the data centers are. But then in this area, it's so important you don't become kind of complacent either, right? So we try to wake up and be paranoid every day and see what do we do now differently, because the world is not going to stand still. So how we try to work with that is basically we talk a lot with customers, understanding kind of their requirements and specifications for next generation stuff, etc. Then talking to the likes like NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, and so on, making sure that we understand what happens on the chip side. And then not the least, partners like Schneider, Vertiv, and others, so we kind of learn from each other. Then we take that and we triangulate and say, okay, what do we look into the current design? What do we look into the next one? And what are some of those factors we need to at least monitor? We may not want to act upon them just now and building into the product, but are likely to come in the next generation. So it's a constant evolution like that. And that's also why we want to make sure, and why we do it is obviously to be technology leader also tomorrow in that sense.
Sounds like a piece of cake.
Yeah, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
Super easy.
Yeah. Oh, but it's so interesting just within the data center area, because I know we all hear so much about it and how this me and Anna we spoke about it the other day. The general thought around AI being this little devil who is eating your energy and spitting out bad phrases, but it's like, would you say, just speaking about the AI and the general, like the general feeling of AI, would you say that is somehow skewed, or can it be done in a good way? Like, is it a bad thing? Is it something that really makes us consume more energy than needed, or what's your take on this?
Yeah, and I sometimes think that the debate becomes a little bit skewed, to be honest, right? Because it's almost like, the data center is the monster that consumes the energy. But I mean, if you take a step back, right, and we've done measurements around it, but in Sweden, for instance, the average person accesses a data center 40 times per day, but often without knowing it. But our everyday life in this digital world is obviously where you have that ingrained all the time, whether it's traditional enterprise services, cloud, or AI, right? And that is not going to go away. Digitalization will only continue to increase, and as a country then, and as a company, and so on, if you want to be competitive, if you want to be driving productivity enhancements, working with innovation and so on, unless you tap into AI, others will actually pass you, right? So you're not going to stay in business. So I think the question is more about saying, okay, so AI is here to stay and it's actually just going to increase. How do we then make it as efficient as possible? And that's where we try to really address that, from that system thinking, from everything from obviously design into renewable energy, into excess heat and so on. But again, you need to have that dialogue. Then I think there could be, I mean, if we look at ourselves, then how we, as average Joe, how we're using AI today, I think there's actually a little bit of public education to be done, right? If you do a Google search versus a ChatGPT search, I mean, the ChatGPT consumes 10 times more energy. An AI-generated image consumes 50 times more energy. I don't think everybody knows that. So perhaps I need to talk to my kids about, sitting and making unicorn pictures and so on. And like, okay, you can do that to some extent, but not all the time. So I think that may be a little bit of an awareness dialogue. But staying away for AI for the sake of energy, well, then as a country or as a company, you're not going to survive.
No, I fully agree with what you're saying. I think both, a little bit more education around it, because I think it's a little bit of a fear. And also, I think if you listen and read, AI is going to take your job, or whatever, instead of, how can we accomplish? And from a Schneider perspective with AI, how can we support, for example, the industry to find much more innovative solution in the industry to consume less power, for example. But also, I was thinking with AI, how do we also learn how to work with it? And you talk about the collaboration you have in order to be on top of the innovation. And there's a lot of also smaller companies that just pops up, because everything goes so quickly right now. So how do you cope with that type of really good ideas coming from quite small companies right now, and to keep track of that?
Yeah, no, but it's a good
question. Waking up every morning paranoid, but how do you do, Peter?
No, but the pace is fast, and to be honest, I feel as a company we can actually do more with AI ourselves than we do currently. So it's been a little bit of bandwidth limitation. But for instance, in our partnership with Schneider Electric, looking at, for instance, energy optimization and so on, I think there's tons of those type of use cases where we should be spending more time. Now it's been it's a busy work just being a scale up and finding the time for everything. But it's something where we need to internalize that into our operations much more than we do today. So we're still scratching the surface on it. And if I look back at my journey with Ericsson, we were tasked 2019 to be the front runners, both for Ericsson, but also then for the Wallenberg kind of portfolio group of companies. And those were a dreadful 2 first years in kind of trying to apply AI. And as a senior executive, I was ashamed of the poor investment decisions I made because I wasn't equipped to kind of make it. And then finally we started to see productivity happening and so on. And it's going to be the same journey here. So it's something we need to be much more focused on moving forward here.
Talking about change and enabling change, like we both come, all of us in this room come from companies, EcoDataCenter, Schneider Electric, which very much is in the business of enabling change for our customers, right? So to give the customers the needs to automate, to digitize, to electrify their businesses, What would you say is the main areas? And this is a question to both you, Peter, and to you, Anna. What is the main areas where you think that these changes could or should be made?
You want to start, Anna? Or I start? Yeah. So I think right now we're just in wave one, and wave one of AI has been large language models, full stop. I mean, that's where 90+% of investments are going and so on. I'm personally super excited about this next phase, where you got to start to see modules either for individual companies or specific industries. So you go and you look at drug discovery and etc. Right? So that's where I think you're going to have much more of those productivity enhancements that we have been talking about. Whereas this first wave has more about opening that door. I think in the discussions I'm having with different enterprises, I've seen a shift just over the last, I would say, 12 months, where there was a lot of wait and see before, and it's like we don't really know how even to kind of dip our toes into this, into now like, hey, how do we engage and so on. And I think there we together as an industry must come also and help each other, right? Because it needs, you start with what's the problem I'm trying to solve, but then you need to start building a use case and so on, and even more on small medium enterprises. They're not going to be equipped for that. So here I think again, as an industry, we need to come together, making sure that we equip also all companies making full use out of this. But again, I'm super excited with this next chapter, and we start to see good signs now into different industries where this is going from just the large language models into much more of value.
Yeah, and to build on that, I mean, I think what we're seeing, for example, up north in Sweden, with green steel, and I mean, that development, thanks to, electrification and digitalization, and also what kind of, that we are putting Sweden, again, to be very innovative as a company. You talked about that, I mean, how we had, for example, with Ericsson, I mean, putting really Sweden on the map with what Ericsson development. And also if we can see right now what is happening up there, if we really, with the second wave that you talk about, make that a success. I think we have a unique position here in Sweden to take on, the leadership as the tech company that we used to be.
I fully agree, and building on that a little bit. So we work both with the Swedish AI Commission, and we've also been working with Stanford around kind of the AI index, where they basically look at maturity in different countries, and where Sweden ranks high in some areas but really low in others. But I think the good news is still that this is the early innings of AI, right? This is going to be a journey going on for 20, 30 years and so on. So if we mobilize now, and a little bit to what you talked about, Anna, those ingredients that we have as a foundation to build upon, if we mobilize quickly, this can really be a game changer for Sweden. And I'm personally optimistic, and I think we're going to get there, but it will require some swift action and really happening in the near future.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think as a private person, we are quite easy to adapt. And I think that should be really utilized as well, because as a private person, you adapt to things, you start making use of it. That is typical for Swedes, and companies coming from Silicon Valley, and they come here to try out, new applications or whatever, because we have easy. And I think that is also a foundation to make this, the bigger picture also happening here in Sweden.
No, I fully agree, and it's almost like you need, what is the home PC reform equivalent for AI in terms of driving citizen awareness and education and kind of closing that gap, right? And we know that with all technology that it can be a little bit scary at first, but then you start dipping your toes and you actually see the value of it. But that's where I think we need to embrace it and kind of encourage people to learn, and getting it into schools, but also then I think large enterprises, they will already have the budgets for this. Small medium enterprise, and perhaps even more so public sector, 50 or more than 50% of Swedish GDP is public sector. How far have they come in AI, and look at what that can drive in terms of better public service, etc.
Now we have talked about all the potential, sky is the limit more or less. But if we take then, Peter, with cybersecurity, and we see that, companies are being hit with, ransoms and so on, and you can read it, more or less daily in the newspaper. How are you working with that as EcoDataCenter?
I mean, it's something we take super seriously. And it involves both physical and cybersecurity, because both are equally important. So it starts with like, this is critical infrastructure, it can never go down. And that's, I mean, if I look at the service level agreements we have with our customers and so on, that is just the case. And then you need to design accordingly. So everything from making sure that, with power redundancy and what have you, and then you come to physical security, which I cannot reveal what we do, but I can say that it's kind of Fort Knox level in the sense of how we cater for it. And then lastly, then with cybersecurity, where we work with different providers helping us with those type of solutions. And then how we try to test it is basically that we do kind of drill exercises. So we then engage external consultants, whatever, trying to kind of do intrusions into our environment, where we, for instance, then test our operational technology, cooling, power, and so on, making sure that it's kind of bulletproof and you can't get through. But obviously the attempts will become more and more sophisticated, which is why we need to continue to kind of raise the stakes all the time there. So yeah, it's something that's very high up on the agenda, and it's just going to increase, and even more so now in this world of geopolitics.
Yeah, and I understand also that it's a really ongoing process, because what was protecting you today will not protect you tomorrow.
No, exactly. And I mean, it's always been like that the crooks are smart and they are innovative, and they'll find new ways, which is why we need like kind of that constant improvement day to day, right, to make sure that we also safeguard for the future.
I understand fully.
Talking about the future. If we, like today, we have spoken about quite a few things on, to speak about data centers and avoid AI. I would like to see the person who can do that. But I mean, that has been quite a big part of this. And I felt like that was super, at least for me, super interesting to see like how you tackle that and how you future-proof your business. If you were to give advice to the people who are listening to this, maybe business leaders, maybe people within your business, maybe people within other segments in the market, what would be like from your from the background you have, from the experience that you have, what would be the main actions that you would give them, like the main advice?
No, but then I would say, and it may sound a bit cliche-ish, I guess, but I mean, embrace change because it's coming, and leverage technology. I mean, the world is becoming increasingly, dependent upon technology. So even if it feels scary and you don't know where to start and so on, unless you start that journey. And I mean, there is this kind of famous quote around AI that you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by a person using AI. And the same is true for companies and so on, right? So I really think it starts with that. And if you don't have the strategy internally, okay, engage with other people that know on that topic, right? But know for sure that you will be disrupted. So then you're better off at least getting started, even if it's a slow journey in the first innings. That's still where you need to go. I think if you look in history, I never think we've had an economy that's so dependent on technology, and that is not going to change. That's just going to increase. And I can feel myself in my career, for instance, I was much more of a generalist early on in my career. I never studied as much as I have the last 10 years, just to be read up on things and being able to add value to discussions with investors or my board or customers or policymakers and so on, right? So I think it's just getting that complex, but technology is the common denominator, and it will innovate and change and disrupt businesses.
Very well put, Peter. And I think also to add on that one, partnership. Becoming more and more, of importance, because nobody can do it all on their own. So you have to rely, where you see, partnership fits, and really develop that area as well.
No, fully agree. And there, when I look at the journey that we've had together with Schneider Electric, it's been fantastic, right? When we were the new kids on the block, you still gave us a lot of kind of attention, priority, and support, and so on. And there's so much we have learned on that journey, and we will continue to learn from each other, right? So you can't go at this alone. You're going to need partners across the whole value chain in that sense.
Agree.
So getting started with to tech up yourself, right? And handle your partnerships quite well. Try to help each other out and make these grand switches together. That's the main advice. Thank you very much. We have come to the end of this podcast. Thank you so much, both Peter and Anna, for joining, and hope you had a good time, and hope that the ones who are listening that they can bring something with them to make them even better leaders within the area of change to come, right?
Thanks for having us, and really enjoyed the conversation, Anna.
Yeah, fully agree. It was really an inspiring morning to sit here and talk about data center and AI together with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. About 40 times a day. That's how often each of us visits a data center, even if we never think about it. We use it when checking social media, when we visit websites, or when we have something like ChatGPT or another LLM handle tasks for us. Yet, very few of us pause and consider what it actually takes to deliver these services and what the impact is. Well, I got a lot wiser today on that subject together with Peter and Anna, and I hope you did too. I also came to understand why it's so important, both on a personal level and a political level, to focus on how we use these technologies and to educate both current and future generations about them. On a personal level, we really need to think about when and how we use those tools and choose the right solutions for the right scenarios. And on a political level, we need to recognize that we're on the cusp of a huge opportunity for tech infrastructure, where we can leverage our local climate, our ecosystem of suppliers, and the talent in the north to build excellent, sustainable data centers. But what it also means is that we need to commit on a policy level, streamline permits, and do everything we can to elevate and accelerate this industry. I hope that you enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm Oliver Oberg from Schneider Electric, and it's been a pleasure having you.